Welcome. I'm your host, Elisa Bielatich-Davis. This is Everyday Orthodox. And, we just get together here on Sunday nights to get to know another everyday Orthodox Christian. We're just building up church unity, one person at a time. And tonight, I'm very excited to introduce you to our guest because it's a friend of mine. I made her come on the show. The funny thing is sometimes we get so busy that the only way that we get to spend a little time together is if I talk somebody into coming on the show. And then I'm like, listen, that's a guaranteed hour of chatting. It's so nice to get to catch up. So tonight you're going to get to meet my friend, Sophia Kellachow. Now, Sophia and I met actually at an Ancient Faith Women's Retreat. So we can also put in a little word for Ancient Faith Women's Retreats. They're really good. They're every year in November, and they're, good speakers, beautiful people. But the big thing is you just make good friends. Like Sophia, she was just there, and we just hung out. It was really nice. But so, all right. So let me tell you just a little bit about her. She's a science teacher. She's an Orthodox wife and mother. She has a passion for education, for church music. She's doing, youth work. In her spare time, though, she loves gardening, reading, cooking, and beekeeping. And beekeeping is one of those things that I think is very picturesque and very lovely, but also terrifying. I'm afraid of bees. So we'll have to ask Sophia how she's managing that. But anyway, without any further ado, here she is. Welcome to the program.
Thank you. It's so good to be here with you. Thank you for asking me.
Oh, I'm so glad that you're on the show. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. But okay, Sophia, I always start at the very beginning, and I always ask, where were you born?
So I was born in Kingston, Pennsylvania, small Pennsylvania town, northeast PA.
Okay. So you have not gone far from home because you're where, I don't know exactly where you are, but you're near Harrisburg, close enough to be going to church in Harrisburg,
near Harrisburg, right? Yep. So I live just outside of Hershey in a little town called Hummelstown. And
oh, right. Does Hershey really smell like chocolate? They do that, right? Doesn't Hershey pump the smell of chocolate into the air?
What's even better, in my opinion, I love when the Reese's factory roasts peanuts. I have a nostalgia about Saturday mornings, especially getting up, going outside early, when the air is still cool, and having this amazing scent of roasted peanuts just wafting through the air. And it's like, I'm hungry. It's going to be a good day.
That's so neat. That is really, I don't know. I get all these visions of Willy Wonka and stuff in my head when I start thinking about living in a town with a real live chocolate factory and smelling the candy being made. And it's so cool. It's very cool.
It is.
All right. So you're in Kingston though, not Hershey, right? When you were born.
Right. So I was born, technically I was born at the Wilkes-Barre General Hospital.
Sure.
So technically Wilkes-Barre, which is right over the river from Kingston, but my hometown was Kingston, Pennsylvania, small town, just a nice little suburban town. One fond memory of that town, speaking of chocolate factory, is we lived a couple blocks away from a place called Chocolate Popcorn, and they made the popcorn balls.
Oh,
yeah.
Yum.
So,
oh, yeah.
So
those are awesome. That was one of my favorite things in the whole world was the popcorn balls.
Well, when school was out, we would smell them making them, and we would ride our bikes over, and they would give us free popcorn balls at the loading dock.
Oh, nice.
Still a little bit warm and so good.
Oh my gosh, you just lived in Candyland. That's crazy.
All my life.
That's so neat. It's really neat. All right. So there you are. You're growing up with the smell of candy all around you at all times. Did you have siblings? Were you part of a big family, or was it kind of you against the world? What was it like?
Not a small family, actually. I have one sister who is biologically my entire sister. And I have a half brother and I have a step brother. So, okay. But at the time, I'm the younger of the two sisters. And my sister had always been my best buddy as a kid. And I think we were just kind of stuck together. We had other kids on the street, but not a lot of girls. So I grew up, you might find this interesting. I grew up playing Army with the boys on the street.
There you go.
And as a person who is always thinking about good health and good nutrition, I got it from my father, who would always like make sure to push all the supplements on me, even back then. But
That's great.
I would go inside and I would get the chewable orange vitamin C and take them outside, and we would use them as power pills for when we were playing Army, and I would give them to the boys on the street.
So everyone's much healthier than they might have been had they not been playing Army with you. I love that.
Right.
I love that you point out that you and your sister were kind of stuck with each other anyway, though, right? Because it's like, we have such wonderful memories of hanging out with our siblings and stuff. But ultimately, it's like, well, we were friends because we had no choice. But in the end,
honestly, now we choose to be friends.
Right? Well, I think eventually, when you're kids growing up, a lot of times you don't appreciate how much you have in common. You think you're very different. And then later it's like, oh no, we actually do have a lot in common because we come from the same place and we have the same experiences. And, so you end up with that.
My sister and I, we had a good 10 years that we had little to no contact at all. And that's a whole story in and of itself. I'm fine to share it. So my parents are divorced, and both parents remarried, and my sister had a falling out with my father, believe it or not, at my husband's funeral dinner. You can't make this up. And I refused to take sides. So for a period of time there, she really didn't want to talk to me because then that was inadvertently still connected to my father. So that rift has, of course, since been, healed.
I'm sure.
And everybody has moved on. But there was a period of time that, we really didn't have any communication, and it was hard.
Especially when you're grieving, right? Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because like you said, right, like that's a crazy time to get in a fight. But on the other hand, I think it's also a natural time to get in a fight because there is so much emotion and there's so much upheaval and everything feels very, I don't know, I guess, raw. Especially family relationships, right? Like they all feel very important and in focus and raw and it all just happens then. But it's an interesting thing. And, I don't want to jump too far ahead, but, I know you were young and you were grieving your husband and trying to work through that. You're certainly not like widow kind of age. You were very young.
No.
But, yeah, it's hard enough to be going through grief. It's harder to do it without your sister. But thank God it's all sort of back together as it should be. But so let's get to that part of the story, though. First, as you're growing up, were you guys religious? What were you guys up to? What were you?
Okay. So I was born to a Catholic family, and we went to church every Sunday. Nice. I have to say that I think we were a really good Catholic family. Did all the catechumen, all the catechism, and received all the sacraments. And we, like I said, we went to church together as a family. My grandfather, so he was very, very faithful, very pious, and he would go to church regularly, almost daily when he got older. He was a teacher too, which is kind of cool. And I was not a teacher when he died, which is kind of neat. So now that I am, I wish I could tell him I am, but he knows.
Right? He knows.
So we had a grotto in Wilkes-Barre where there was a statue of the Mother of God, and it was the typical Catholic, pretty dome with standing and and they would all put flowers around it. It was a really nice spot. Rocks on the back of a mountainous wall, and it was very pretty. And we would go there and we would say the rosary together pretty regularly. So,
what a nice memory.
It really is. And I haven't thought about it in a long time. Thank you for bringing it out. But it was interesting because, I don't know what the future holds, but I can tell you that when I was a little girl, I'm pretty sure I wanted to be a nun. So do you remember the story of the show, The Flying Nun? Are you there?
Oh yeah. Sally Field. Absolutely.
Yes. So I used to walk around the house with a dishcloth over my head and pretend I was a nun. And then I would take it off and wear it as a cape. And my mom will tell this story still, that I would, in her words, leap around the house saying, for joy, for joy, for joy. And I guess I had a little bit of a lisp, so it was kind of like, for joy. So, yeah.
That's awesome. I can actually very easily, I can picture this. Absolutely.
I haven't changed much.
No.
I would still consider being a nun, but not anytime soon.
Your husband probably would object to that. I feel like husbands don't like that as much as one would think.
No, but I feel like we're more accepting of it. Like if he went on a trip to Mount Athos and decided he wanted to be a monk, I would, miss him obviously, but I would think, hey, all right, that's pretty cool. I'm jealous.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there are actually a lot of very saintly couples who would be like usually royalty or something, right? But like as they get really old, they would just go retire to different monasteries, and there you go. It's not a terrible idea. It's not a bad way to handle the awkwardness of retirement. It's just like
that is true. I'm preparing for retirement. Actually, I mean, I don't know when that day will come, but I'm starting to do a couple of things that I think will put me in a place where I can enjoy retirement.
It's kind of not. I mean, I didn't know that I would enjoy beginning to reach that age, but it's like, oh no, that's kind of cool. I don't mind planning for that. That's not bad.
It is kind of neat. I think there's something that comes that you get out of being older, wiser, maybe a little bit more calm, not so jerky in making decisions. And you know what I mean? It's kind of neat to be an older chick.
Yeah, it really is, right? Not so reactionary to the things around you, but just kind of grounded with the, I'm with you. I'm not minding it a bit. Absolutely. Oh. But okay, so you're growing up, nice Catholic girl, dishcloth on your head, ready to maybe take orders if that's what God sends your way.
Yeah.
So what were you like? What kind of things were you looking at in school? What were you thinking about? Like, did you know you were going to be a science teacher, or did you love science, or was it like not even on your radar at the time?
Well, I think I was too young to have it be on my radar, but looking back, I think if anybody were to have thought about it and looked at me, they would have said, she's going to do something. So my mom also tells the story of how when she would be cleaning out my pockets to do laundry, she would always find like dead bugs and rocks and things like that. I used to love to play in the backyard in a place that we had pine trees in our backyard that kind of lined the back. And I would go back and play under there, and I named it Pinecone City. And I would do things with the sap and with the pine cones and things like that. So it was a lot of fun. Me and my dog, Sandy.
I love that.
Cockapoo.
Oh, that's so nice. This is very picturesque. This is very Pennsylvania youth. I love this.
Yeah. So the other part of it is, and this is just something that I really remember, we lived down the street from a couple that had two very young girls. And of course, not many girls on the street. You play with them when you can. And there was one little girl that we were playing school. And I was the teacher, of course. And she learned something. And I remember her getting, like, I remember that moment of when it was like that aha moment that we talk about. And I think that was the day when I was like 5 that I decided I wanted to be a teacher. I was probably a little older than that.
Wow.
So when I was 5, there was the flood of 1972, and our house was flooded up to the 2nd floor. So we moved back to our street later, which interestingly enough, my parents owned our house. They bought another house across the street, which was larger. We renovated both homes, sold the smaller house, and moved into the bigger house. So this had to be somewhere maybe 6 or so, probably when I started going to school. And I was like, hey, that'd be pretty cool.
Right. Well, so how do you flood to the 2nd story? I mean, was that like a dam broke? What happened? So
it was Agnes. Agnes was the storm that came through. And excuse me, it was 1972, the Susquehanna River. They tried to, bag it with sandbags and everything else. I remember when the sirens went off for everybody to evacuate and things like that. And after the waters subsided, we came back and, we took what we could. And I remember I had this dress on that was like one of my favorite dresses, and I slipped and fell in the flood mud, and it was the grossest smell, and it was kind of slimy, and it was just so sad that I fell in my dress. But I guess everything worked out in the end.
Yeah, flood mud, it's bad, right? Because you don't think about it, but it's like, it's not just mud that came in from the river, right? It's like every liquid in every house got all mixed in with it, and it's all gross. And so was it like a rushed emergency evacuation? Did you guys have enough notice to leave easily, or that? Because that's crazy. I mean, I know you were little, but
it's a long time ago, but I mean,
yeah,
I think so.
Wow.
I know that, I can tell you that we still have photo albums and things like that from when we were little. So, I mean, it was enough time to at least take the pictures.
That's good. That's good. Especially back then when pictures were all paper and film, and you really had to keep it. Well, that's good. At least you guys got to keep all of your family memories.
We have a picture of my dog floating on a raft down our street.
Wow. That's crazy. That is just crazy. Gosh. Okay. Well, there you go. I didn't realize stuff like that happened in Pennsylvania. I'm kind of amazed at this. Wow. See, I see that stuff in Texas a lot. I'm like, oh yeah, Texas it's crazy. The weather here is crazy, but that is terrifying stuff. Okay. So as you're getting older, as you're like getting toward middle school and high school and all that, were your parents together the whole time you were little and then divorced, or were you young when they split up?
So they split up right after my 8th grade year of school. So going.
Oh, that's a rough spot.
Yeah, it's really rough.
Probably not the ideal moment.
Between that, there's a lot of craziness that happened in between that. My parents owned and operated a small grocery store that was, I want to say, close to an hour away from where we lived. We moved out to Dallas, Pennsylvania from Kingston and built a house on a beautiful piece of property. And then my dad opened this business, and during my summers, I would get up in the morning with my parents, drive up there, work at the store. I found, big surprise, I found a creek to play in across the street because I had to be outside. So, that was fun. And we would go back to religion. So there was this Baptist church around the corner from our house, and they had the best summer VBS. I mean, Jesus is the rock of my salvation. His banner over me is love, right? And the bug juice and the cookies for snack and those things that like just are so memorable. But they had this Arrowhead Awana camp, and my sister and I would go every summer. And that summer, I worked the start of the summer and the end of the school year and the start of the summer. I worked and I paid my way to camp, which was really exciting for me because I probably didn't pay my way to camp, but my parents.
Well, you might have.
Now that I think about it, I don't think I worked that many hours. But
parents it's good. They're trying to encourage you, so they let you feel like you paid your way through camp. That's good.
But I never asked them. I don't think I ever will either. I'll just let them have that.
Yeah.
That secret, and that pleasure, right?
Well, maybe camp didn't cost that much back then. Who knows?
Probably not.
Well,
but in the meantime, things were very, very tumultuous in our house. There were a lot of loud, I don't want to say violent, but kind of violent fights. I remember them putting the bar stools across the kitchen because of like broken glass, and there was one time. That it was very traumatic. My mom and my dad were really going at it in terms of just not doing this well. And it was getting to where one night my mom and I stayed in a women's shelter because my dad said that he was coming to find her and he had a gun in the car. And then when I was much younger, I had really long hair, like down to the middle of my back. And I had gotten it cut to about where it is now. And I couldn't wait to come home and show my parents. So I had, in all this time and all the craziness, I had a grandfather who was really like a beacon for me. And he instilled in me my love for ice cream, which is my Achilles tendon. But he and I would sit and have ice cream oftentimes. But anyhow, he had taken me for the haircut. My parents were busy with the store and things like that. And at this time, my mom had started a different job outside of the home and outside of the store. I was out with my grandfather. We had called them and asked them if they would come and meet us. And of course, we didn't have cell phones at that time. So, we get to the restaurant, can I use your phone? Kind of deal. And they're not showing up, not showing up, not showing up. So I got up, I tried to call them back, no answer. And we decided we were going to finish eating and go back. And when I went in, my dad had my mom sitting in one of the dining room chairs and had a handgun at her head. And, I shouted and, broke it up, but it turned into a really very traumatic night.
Yeah.
And I hate to even bring it up, but it is part of the story because I don't have an ounce of angst towards either of my parents. I'm actually very close with them. I talk to them almost every day. And, I think especially as an adult, you realize that even though things happened to you when you were young or things happened in front of you or whatever the case, I don't think most parents are bad. I don't think they're trying to inflict anything on their children. And, quite honestly, they were going through their own stuff and trying to just manage it. And it doesn't always get managed well,
Well, and probably in a lot of ways, they felt like they were trying to manage it for you guys. Like that if they didn't have kids, maybe they wouldn't have stayed together as long as they did. They felt like they were doing something useful for you. And it's like, well, you could have spared me some of that. That would have been all right. But what was it like then when they split up? Was it kind of a relief that the tension was past, or did everything just get worse? What was it like?
No, actually, and again, I wish I could use fictitious names to spare the identity of those I'm speaking of, because I really love them and I never want to hurt them by saying it, but it is what it is, But when my parents split up, my mom, they would always try to, I got used as a weapon, so my dad would use me to try and get to see my mother. My mother would tell me bad things about my father, like, oh, if he comes to the door, call the police. And so I remember being a ninth grader in a new school, being left at home alone while my mom was working at night. My dad comes and he's banging on the door, and I'm like on the ground calling the police, scared, thinking that he's going to come in and do something. And he never would have done anything to me. I should have known that. But as a young kid who's now, all my things are uprooted and really don't have friends right now because we just got there. What do I do with this? We didn't have the cell phones where I could have called my mom and said, hey,
Right.
What do I do?
Well, or even where your dad could have communicated with you more often in a way that would have helped you know that, like, okay, you guys are mad at each other, but I'm good with both of you. Like that, all of that kind of, I really think children whose parents are divorced now have this advantage in a sense where the parent who's not physically present at the moment can always reach them and they can, but back then it was very different and it was isolating and it was hard. But so these are your high school years in a new town. Were you just a mess as a teenager, or were you?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's fair. Fair enough.
I think I would be willing to come back on the show in about, let me see, my youngest is 10 right now. So maybe another 10 years and I can give you more of the details. But as for now, we're not going to tell all the tales. But but I spent a lot of time just hanging out with the friends that I got and, not doing anything terrible, but, we were mischievous, So if you can picture this, me in a pair of Levi's with Herman Survivor boots, a t-shirt and a flannel shirt, listening to Iron Maiden and Ozzy Osbourne.
Yes, I can picture that. Absolutely,
So,
I can picture that.
and being good buddies with the guys, they treated me with great respect, and there was never
Good.
anything ugly that happened with them. But you know, it was a kind of a neat place to be, and they can all be angry for me. All the singers can
Yep.
be angry for me, and
Yes. Yeah, it's true. Sometimes that's really helpful for teens. I didn't think a lot about that, but music can express a lot of the emotions that maybe you're not free to express, or you don't want
it's
to. You don't
interesting
want to deal with
is
it.
even through that time, because my mother started dating someone, and she ended up marrying him, and she would get ready for work on a Friday morning and pack up her things, and she would go to work on Friday, and she would come home Sunday night. So here I was, a high school kid, home all alone all weekend long, which
Oh, wow.
was, kind of a recipe for disaster.
Yep.
But I really believe that there was someone watching over me, because when I think about some of the things, just the dumb kid things that I did, hop in a train. It was fun. I'd go
Yeah.
hop trains.
Oh my gosh.
Moving.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Just, yeah, like in the movies.
Yeah.
Yeah, you could get yourself
We'd
into
get
some
off,
real trouble.
Yeah. I mean, things that are like I said, nothing that, I would need to, I guess they could
Right.
punish you for that, but, nothing
Yeah.
terrible.
Nothing
But like you
evil,
said,
but just
it's right.
because you're a teenager, you don't always get like what all the consequences that are out there could be. And I don't know, sometimes you don't care too at that age,
Well,
even if you do know.
And that's what I was going to say. I think part of it was that, I don't want to say I was depressed teen, because I wasn't. I think I was always anytime I think about myself, I think that I was happy at this point in my life, and happy at this point, and happy in this point, regardless of what was going on. But, I think it was definitely just trying to have a numbness,
Yeah.
the music, be angry, go do things without worrying about consequences, because, hey, you know what, who cares?
Yeah. Well, and there's always a little, I feel like at that age, especially when your family's doing things that are really problematic, it's kind of like, they deserve it if something terrible happens to me. Like, oh, are my parents going to be upset? Oh, too bad. Like there's this little element of like kind of hoping something goes sideways so that they'll suffer, even though obviously that means you'll suffer too. So it's kind of it's problematic.
But I was angry. So
Yeah.
before my parents split up, I was doing track and field, and I was a cheerleader, and I sang in the chamber choir and things like that. I made first co-captain of the cheerleading team for my 9th grade year, and my parents move.
That's heartbreaking.
And I was playing field hockey. I gave it all up. I didn't do anything. It was like, why bother?
Isn't that
argued over what school I'd go to? Is it Catholic school? Is it parochial school? So I did part-time. I did a couple of years in one, a couple of years in the other. And just when I graduated, I was like, let's just get this horse and pony show over with.
Yeah, I bet.
I wasn't one of the kids that was crying at graduation.
Yeah, I bet. So what'd you do after you graduated?
So I had started going to school to get a cosmetology license when I was in high school. So I was at least industrious. I went to high school during the day, and then a couple days a week I would grab my gear, walk over to Empire Beauty School in Wilkes-Barre, and
really
cosmetology courses. Yep.
Wow, I don't think I've ever known a high schooler who is also doing like vocational training on the side. You were
right?
Industrious. Well, you had all that energy, right? You're like, well, I'm not going to run track, and I'm not going to be a cheerleader.
Right?
Yeah, I got time on my hands now. Wow.
Exactly. So I did that, and then when I graduated, I had to finish up my hours. So I finished up my hours, and then I also worked as a candy striper at the local nursing home, which was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It is a lot of fun.
Yeah,
that's neat.
And then
that's really neat.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. And at one point, I guess one of my life regrets, when I was 17, there was this guy And he and I were pretty serious. It was pretty serious a couple of times through life, actually. And he proposed more than once, we'll put it that way. And yes. And he was going to join the Army. And he said, you should join the military with me. And I said, well, I don't want to join the Army. And he said, well, just, why don't you go down and talk to a recruiter? So I decided I wanted to join the Air Force. And I really did. And because I was not 18, my mom had to sign my papers. So the recruiter came to the house. We arranged it that he would come. When he got there, she refused to sign the papers and scared me, thinking that I was going to get in the military and that they were going to promise me the world and, they were going to sell me, a bag of goods. So, it scared me and I didn't do it. And I think that's one of my big life regrets right now, because I have such a high respect for our military. And the man I married was in the Navy, and I'm so proud of my son because he is now I think he's a first lieutenant. He was a second lieutenant, but I'm not sure if his promotion date has passed or not. But he's a second lieutenant in the Air Force, and I lived vicariously through him.
Right? It is, yeah. I can picture that as he starts doing it. You're like, oh, I thought about doing that. I should have. How would things have turned out? Gosh. Well, that is really neat. That is really beautiful. Well, okay, we're going to take a very short break, and then we're going to come back, and we're going to hear more about your wonderful story, Sophia. Thank you. We'll be right back, guys.
Thank you.
Year after Pascha, the Orthodox Church celebrates the holy myrrh bearers, who cared for Jesus' body after he was crucified. But myrrh bearing has a broader definition. It can serve as a metaphor for the practical, incarnate love to which Christ calls his followers. In The Art of Myrrh Bearing, author Elisa Bielatich Davis explores the lives of grace-filled, myrrh-bearing saints in Scripture and throughout the life of the Church, offering questions for reflection in each chapter. By following the lead of compassionate saints, such as Joseph of Arimathea and Olga of Alaska, we can learn to embrace a simple and profound way of life in ever-deepening communion with Christ and with others. You can find this book at store.ancientfaith.com. Again, that is store.ancientfaith.com.
Welcome back to Everyday Orthodox. Blessed Pentecost to you. We are here building community the old-fashioned way through conversation. If you stick around listening to this show long enough, you will get to know people in every jurisdiction, every corner of this continent, and hopefully we'll just all get to know each other better. And, of course, we can't do these things alone. Mike and Simon are in the Chesterton studios, and they're producing this and making sure that you can see us tonight and every Sunday night at the Ancient Faith website and on YouTube. So thank you guys. And tonight's guest, of course, we're talking to Sophia Kellachow. And Sophia, okay, so we just got to your crazy teenage years. And then you did not, though, join the Air Force, which it is interesting to think of all these forks in the road where, oh wow, what if I had done it? What if I had done it that way? What did you end up doing instead? Because I know you got married fairly young, right? Like,
yeah.
How old were you when you were married the first time?
So I was 21 when I got married the first time.
That's what I thought,
and I married a guy that I had met in high school in 9th grade. And we dated for a year. Things didn't work out. And then about 6 years after we dated, so 6 years after I was in 9th grade, we ran into each other and kind of felt that it was fate calling us back together, and we started to date and ended up getting married. But I should have seen it for what it was. And in retrospect, I look back, and so he was one of 8 children. So, like, story's over. Do I need to say more? I didn't have much of a family, and there was all of a sudden all these brothers and sisters, and the parents were divorced, but I think I was too young and in too crazy of a place in my own life to see the dysfunction that was going on in that life as well.
Yeah.
Parents were not together. Mom was kind of running around, and his dad had a drinking and smoking problem, and but he was a great guy. We'd go and visit him at the bar, and he'd give me the spicy bolognas, and I'd sit down and talk to him, and he was a sweetheart. We got along real well. And he ended up dying of lung and liver cancer, which was sad, but that's kind of what you get when you drink like a fish and smoke like a chimney, right? That's what happens.
Yeah, I have some very beloved family members who passed away that way. And you kind of, it is really sad and you hate to see it. But at the same time, it's also like, well, we all knew this was coming. He knew it too. Mm-hmm. So here we are. Yeah.
But yeah, so, he and I got married, and I want to say that there were problems. And I think, again, if I look back at myself, I was not confident enough in myself to make good decisions in terms of choosing a spouse.
Well, you were 21. I mean, it's pretty, unless you're coming from just a super stable situation, and, it's just really easy to go sideways at that age anyway with any decision.
I was trying to leech on to a family that I didn't have and create something that I didn't have. And I wasn't mature enough, or I wasn't capable at the time. I was in too much turmoil myself. And, as our relationship continued, well, he had a drinking problem. And what ended up happening is I found out that there was, a good amount of mental health issues within his family, and, addiction issues with alcohol. At that time, drugs wasn't a big thing, but smoking and drinking. And, we ended up obviously getting divorced. And it was about after 2.5 years of marriage, because he had continued to promise that he was going to stop drinking, and that this would be different and that would be different. And he was he was a binge drinker. So most of the time he was sober, but when he drank, he drank himself to practically death. And,
wow.
It was very tiring looking after him when that would happen. And it was also very stressful, because any time there was an occasion, you just didn't know if this was going to be another time.
Yeah.
So, but he couldn't see, I don't think he could see it as a problem, and was very distressed when I left. And it was very difficult. I had to have a PFA against him a couple of times. And then, we had a daughter, and so we got married at 21, and we had our daughter when I was 25. So, okay. And then when she was 2.5, I was like, you know what, this is I'm either going to get out of this now, or she's going to be grown up, messed up from a life of this repeated pattern. And then I'm going to leave. And then what? And so
right. Let's get out before there's so much damage to her.
Yep. But,
that's hard to do. I mean, you're young, you're still in your 20s. You're still, that's a big step to decide, okay, I'm going to be a divorced mom and I'm going to make this work. How did it go? Again,
he kind of snapped when I left, because he really didn't want me to leave, obviously. So he followed me. I had PFA, and finally I just got to where I was like, you know what, I'm done with the following. I just drove home. I got out of the car, and I said, listen, I got a baseball bat in the back. If you lay your hand on me, I'm going to use it. I did. And I said, I'm going in the house. I'm going to give Catherine a bath. The bathroom is that window up there. When you see the light on, you'll know that we're in there. You can sit out here and watch the light all night if you want to, but I'm done. And it was almost like when I stood up to him, it was like, okay, this isn't fun anymore. So that kind of helped to ease it. But
that's amazing. Yeah. It's amazing that worked. You know what I mean? That's like, oh, okay, then. All right. But thank God. Thank God. So then you didn't have to look over your shoulder all the time anymore.
Yeah. So interestingly, this gets into where things start getting good. So I've always tried to take decent care of myself. And I was going to the gym, and I never wanted to go to the gym to talk to people. I just wanted to go and exercise and leave. And so I would always go over to the side and use this one elliptical where it was kind of like nobody could bother me. And what ended up happening is this guy that had seen me there got on the one in the middle. So I had no choice but to be on either side of him. So he started to talk to me, and we got to know each other. He was a nice guy. He became my trainer for a while there. And then, we started to just spend time together, go for walks, nothing crazy. And he said, "Hey, did you ever see anybody skydive before?" And I said, "Not in person." He said, "Well, you should come up and see me skydive." And I said, "Okay, that'd be cool." So he gave me the address and gave me some brief directions. And this one day, here in my white work van with my daughter, who's 3 at the time, we drive up to South Canaan we had to turn at the St. Tikhon sign. And I had no idea what a Tikhon was, never heard the word before. And we passed by the arches, the entrance of St. Tikhon's, and rounded the road and up to this dirt road. And I pull up, and there's a guy sitting on a tractor and another guy standing next to him. And I pulled up and parked. He waved to me as I came up, and I waved back, just being polite. Pulled up and parked, and I got out of the car and I said, "Excuse me, can one of you guys tell me where I can find EJ?" And he said, "Oh, he's up there." And I said, "All right, thank you." So I opened the back door and I'm getting my daughter out. And apparently the guy on the tractor said to the other guy, he said, you know, EJ gets all the good ones. You wait, someday she'll be mine." And he did. And he told me that story later. And we ended up getting married.
Wow. That's a great, how we met story. That's awesome.
It really is a great how we met story. And so later on that day, it was their parents' property. It was a 200-acre dairy farm that was turned into a private airstrip.
Oh.
And they would have skydivers up there all day. And so later on, there were, the Tootsie Pops, how they have all the pictures on the outside of the wrapper.
Yes.
There were some Tootsie Pops sitting on this big spool that they used as a table. It was a wire spool. And his sister said, "Oh, if you want a lollipop, go ahead and have one." So I picked up the one that's like the cherry-ish one. It's like raspberry or something like that. Not cherry, but raspberry, the purpley one. And I just set it aside. And he comes over and takes it. And I said, "What are you doing with that?" I said, "That's mine." He goes, "Oh, I'm sorry." And he gave it back to me. And I said, "I was just teasing you." I said, "I wasn't saving it for later. You can have it, And he's like, No, eat it. Go ahead." So I opened it up and he's like, "Is there an Indian with a star on the outside?" And I said,
"Right."
"Yeah." He goes, "You know what that means?" He said, "That means destiny. It means we're supposed to be together." And I'm like, "Oh, brother." So after several different meetings, we had started to see each other, and he turned out to be not only the most wonderful man in my life, but meeting him and coming together with him was the most pivotal point in my life, because he was an Orthodox Christian, and his grandparents, I guess, had donated the property for the first building that St. Tikhon's built there.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So, and he grew up going to St. Tikhon, so he was cradle Orthodox and I was Catholic. So that's the introduction.
Yeah.
His parents were very Orthodox.
So did you convert to Orthodoxy while you knew him, or how did it work? Like, did you have to convert to Orthodoxy to marry him, or was it like you just enjoyed it, or what did you?
No,
how'd it go?
So it actually went not at all as expected. So it really didn't. But of course, what a surprise, right? Life is full of surprises. But what happened was he and I were dating, and we had early on. I went to the Catholic Church. He went to the Orthodox Church, and I went there. I think Pascha was one of the first things that I went for, because his family was always like, oh, Pascha, 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 walk around the church, da, da, da. So I was like, okay, cool, I'll try it out. I loved it. It was fantastic. But I didn't convert right away. I didn't just jump into it. And, his sister had a baby and they baptized the baby there. And so I got little tidbits here and there, but I was a pretty good Catholic. So, I went to this adorable little Catholic church, St. Patrick's. It was you had to wear a coat in the winter because it was so cold in there. It was like old church with very little heat and things like that. But the church was sweet. And, as I started going to the Orthodox Church a little bit, things started popping out at me. And I would notice like the altar boys would come in and there would be very little reverence before going behind the altar and things like that. So, I just started to notice some of those nuances,
Yeah.
And one thing that we had decided, though, is that we were going to, even though we were both married before, and his marriage was terrible, it was very difficult for us to come together because he had been married to this woman who was pretty messed up herself. Again, there were drugs involved with her. He didn't know it at first. And they had gotten married. And one day she came home and said, I'm going to go lay down. I'm tired. And he's like, oh, what's going on? You all right? You didn't work today. And she said, well, I just had an abortion and I'm tired. And he's like, I didn't even know you were pregnant. And it turns out years later, he found out it wasn't even his child. So for him to trust somebody, it was very huge. He tried to make every excuse as to like, well, if this friend likes you, then maybe we can continue. And so finally he said, well, if my dog likes you, and I'm like, are you serious? So and it's like, all right. So, I'm not a dumb girl. I went out and I just bought some dog treats and I put them in my pocket and I fed my way in the house.
See, that's how you do. That's how you do it. I love that. That is so funny.
So we were, very committed to each other. We had a really fun, good relationship. He took me up skydiving, one of my favorite stories. And I went to see an observation flight. He says, I'm going for an observation flight. And I thought, all right, sure. He said, oh, it's a sunset run. It's beautiful. You'll love it. So he goes, here, put this on. And he hands me a parachute. And I'm like, okay. So I really liked him. And I was afraid to say, like, I don't want to do this. So I just did it. And I get into the plane, and there's the only seat there is a pilot seat. It's a small Cessna with a plexiglass door, so you can see out. The door is clear. And see, hopping trains is nothing.
Right.
So I get in there, and he says, all right, well, kneel down here. So I knelt down where the co-pilot was, and he took the seatbelt, which is bolted to the floor, puts it through my leg strap and snaps it. And I'm like, all right, I guess I'm committed. And we took off, and you do circles going up until you get to altitude. And all of a sudden somebody in the back goes, all right, jump, run. And I didn't know what it meant. It meant that they were going to open the door and jump out. So they open the door, and it's the wind's coming, perfect for Pentecost, right? The big blowing wind. And the guys look at me and they go like this and they jump out. So Vlad, his name was Vlad, tipped the plane this way so they could jump out. And then he tipped it back the other way so that I could watch them. And when he did, I'm like, oh my God, because it was like this. So I'm thinking we're going down. So, but it was actually, once I calmed down, it was very beautiful. And, we were able to watch the sun go down, and we landed at a small airport, and it was really nice.
That is really neat.
So,
that's really neat. That's beautiful.
Cool. It was cool.
I love that.
And I miss him. He was such a good friend, and he was such a goof. He was very, very intelligent, very kind, trustworthy, all the things that you would want a man to be. But he was also very much a stinker. He would always, he was just a bug, but a good bug. He was one of those. Like, he knew when it was appropriate, and, would try to push the line a little bit here and there, but it was all in good fun.
That's fun. So now, how long ago did he pass away?
So it was 25 years this year. I was a wreck. Like,
year 2000.
Yeah. It was just like the idea that it was 25 years and I'm 56. And I'm thinking to myself, wow, that's about half my life that, he's gone. And it really it hit me like a ton of bricks this year. I was a wreck.
Yeah, I bet.
I was a wreck.
I bet. It is really interesting. Actually, because I think you assume.
Tomorrow would be his 62nd birthday.
Wow.
I know, right?
Yeah.
No.
That's amazing.
And it was beautiful. Yeah, you go first.
No, I was just going to say, it just doesn't get easier after 20 or 25. I mean, it does, but it doesn't, right? Like it's not as raw, but I think people kind of assume, 5, 10 years, you're doing fine. And it's like, no, you know what? Even 25 years hurts. Mm-hmm. That's hard.
Yeah, I mean, I surprised myself because I was, walking around all day trying to just do things. And then I get into church and I went over to venerate the icon of St. Vladimir and I just lost it. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I felt like such an idiot because I was like, oh, can I just sneak out? Not anybody noticing? No, probably too late for that.
Yeah.
But you know what? I think it's important to allow yourself to feel those things, because if you try to hold it in, that's not authentic. And I think being authentic, obviously you don't want to be overly theatrical about things, but I think it is important to feel your feelings when you need to feel them. To give yourself that grace. Yeah. And then see it for what it is and then move along.
Yep. Well, and it's sort of a crazy thing, right? But I mean, I think people do shove things like that down because they're like, well, it's been 25 years. Like, okay, whatever. It's like, no, you know what? Still hurts. But it is like kind of one big cry and then you're done. And you're okay for a while now again. But it's still hard.
This is a plug for my book idea, right? Remember?
Yes.
We talked about
Sophia has a great idea for a book, but I can't get her to just write it.
I'm a little busy. But, I think the idea, I'll come back to it though, the idea of just understanding and living in a place where grief and gratitude can coexist, and to allow yourself to be joyful, but within the grief, and understand that, it doesn't have to be one or the other. You could be the sobbing, grieving widow for the rest of your life, really, if you want to, but don't miss out on the joy, because, God wants us to have that joy every day. For joy, right? For joy.
For joy. See, it all comes full circle. I love that.
It does.
I love that.
But an interesting story. So he and I were abstaining from marital relations before we got married. And he had a varicocele on his testicle. And that's a varicose vein on the testicle. And one day, he asked me very innocently if I would look at it. He's like, is there something here? Because he said, I'm going to ask my mom to look at it because that'd be weird. And I said, it looks like there's like an earthworm. It was so thick. So he went to a urologist and, he said, well, it's one of the leading causes of infertility in men. And he said, well, we're getting married and we want to try and have children right away. And, what do we do? And he said, well, get married, wait a year, see what happens. And if, you're not able to conceive, then come back and I can do a surgery on you. So he and I talked about it, and he decided that he wanted to do the surgery now because he didn't want to wait. We were already in our late 20s. I was 27 when I met him, and this was about 28-ish when this happened. So he was 32, 33-ish, because he died when he was 35. So can't really put the timing together, but we were already engaged. And he decided he was going to have the surgery. So, he said, they are going to be operating on me. And he said, what if we're not able to be together after this surgery? What if something happens? He said, I think we should be together now at least once so that we can at least have had the opportunity. And, I agreed with the logic, and we were together twice. And one of those 2 times we conceived our son. And the doctor said there was only like a 10% chance that we could have had a child. So you can imagine both of our surprise when I told him that I was pregnant. And I never forget it. I was going to school as a physical therapist assistant, and I was getting ready to have go meet a friend to study for finals, and I just knew. And I took a pregnancy test in the school bathroom, and it came back positive. And I'm like, Roxanne, I just found out I'm pregnant. She's like, what? So I went to the bookstore and bought this really cute card that it was one of the Ann Geddes cards. It had a big stack of fluffy towels with this little naked baby. And I wrote him a note inside and gave it to him. And he was like, so happy. But then he would make jokes about, well, if this baby comes out looking like this, if this baby, and I'm like, listen, I didn't do anything. Like, this is, you and I.
Right.
So the day that
it.
Vlad was born, exactly, the day that he was born, he looked identical to his father. I mean, like, even he was born with his hair parted and combed back, and I just loved him. And it was interesting because the birth was hilarious. We had a good time. It was like saying, all right, you should have another contraction about now. And it would start, and I'd be like, cut it out. Had a good time. It was like, come on, don't worry, it's going to stop right about now. So he was that kind of like a nudge. But so Vlad was born, and he said, well, it looks like you don't need me anymore. That boy has stolen your heart. And I was like, no, come on, get out of here. Little did we know that 10 weeks later, he was going to die in a plane crash. So that is what, like, I remember him saying that so profoundly.
Yeah.
And who would think? So now I have this 6.5-year-old from my first marriage that was horrible. And now I have this 10-week-old baby from this marriage, and I'm starting to sound like Elizabeth Taylor. Please forgive me. Right? But, it was, I will never forget it.
Yeah.
Never forget it. But at that time, let's tie this up here, though. I was not Orthodox at that time. So our son.
Oh, I do know this.
Which is what
started, I forgot
this
about
is what
that.
Started. Yes.
That's right. You hadn't
conversation
converted.
to begin with. I just didn't volunteer this for nothing, because every piece of it has a significance within the whole story, right?
Yep.
So here I am, still Catholic, and here we are, like, not married or anything, and what are we going to do now? So he goes and he talks to the priest at St. Tikhon's, who happened to be the dean of the students, who clearly had dealt with this kind of stuff before with students. And because he had planned, like, he just pulled it out.
Right.
I don't think he had to think about it. So he encouraged my husband to start coming back to church more, because he had started coming with me more often, which was interesting. And we were getting closer to when the baby would be born. And he's like, well, what are we going to do about baptizing this baby? And I said, well, you know what? I have an idea. Little did I know it was a really Orthodox idea. So it must have been lurking in me. The Orthodoxy must have been there, and I just didn't recognize it at first. But I said, well, how about if the baby is a girl, we can baptize her in my church. And if the baby is a boy, we can baptize him in your church. And, my vision of this is that, sometimes we see God as fairy godmother. Okay, this is one of those moments. Make it pink,
right.
Make it blue. Pink,
right.
Blue.
And he did, though. He made it blue. So did you convert in order to, like, at the same time that you were baptizing him? No, it took you a while, right? That's what I thought. Yeah. But, so, but you had to raise him in the Orthodox Church. So there you go.
Yes. So what happened is this priest baptizes this beautiful baby that I'm crazy about, and lays him in front of the royal doors, and I go pick him up, St. Simeon, the whole beautiful thing, and he smells amazing. And St. Tikhon's is such a beautiful environment, and he stands up there and says, and now it is the job of the parents to raise him in the Orthodox faith. And I went, okay. So I felt almost like doing it without being part of the Orthodox Church would make me a hypocrite. So after the service, I said, all right, you got me. What do I have to do to sign up here?
I love it.
He said, well, you know what? He said, let's just let things settle down. Let's get to the new year. And then after the new year, we'll start. Well, little did we know, January 6th on Theophany. So that was December 5th when my son was baptized. January 6th on Theophany, my husband dies in the plane crash. And
there you go.
It was like, okay, now what? So I hadn't even, it just wasn't even a thought in my head at the moment. I don't even know what I was thinking when I go back, but I think it was just in survival mode for sure.
Yeah.
But what happened was we went with his parents over to the Metropolitan's house, which is right by the property. At that time, it was Metropolitan Herman. And actually, was it still Metropolitan Theodosius?
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember, but it was either,
right.
I know it was at least Bishop Herman at the time. And when my husband was little, my late husband was little, he served with him when he was Father Joseph. Like,
oh, how beautiful.
So he wanted
now,
to.
Is he the one who ended up, did he do your baptism as well?
No. So
no, that would have been too much. Okay. Too many coincidences there.
Yeah, right. But
yeah.
So Father Juvenali Repass was the monk who took me through. And what was interesting is Bishop Herman said, okay, here's what we're going to do. So my husband was buried on January 10th. And he said, February 14th, you're going to come in and we're going to chrismate you on the 14th of February. And he said, that'll be your husband's 40th day, and it's a perfect time for you to enter the church. So what makes this even better is 40 days was Valentine's Day. So February 14th is my chrismation anniversary. So I always say that Jesus is my Valentine. But, it's interesting. Before I even read a single Orthodox book, I remember, and I described it this way, crawling into St. Tigon's on the knees of my heart and going to the icon of Christ and feeling so completely broken. Broken, like I can't even describe broken. And looking at the icon, I think it every time I go into church. I went in and I said, okay, I can't do this without you. I need you to be the husband and father of this family now. And,
glory to God. That's so beautiful.
Right?
That's
I was
very
in
beautiful.
The skinny green book.
Yep. The classic green book back in the day.
That was my book. I read that and I met with Father Juvenali, and it was less than 40 days that I had to figure all this out and show up.
And look how beautifully it has turned out, though. It has come out so well, and it's such a beautiful thing. And in the end, you have the church and your son, and may it be blessed. Well, Sophia, this is beautiful. I love talking with you. You and I could talk for hours, which, because we can, and it's fun, and we have. But I'm going to have you come back on the show, because there's a whole other chapter later that comes, and everybody's going to miss out on it. But thank you so much for being with us tonight. This was just beautiful.
And thanks for having me.
Thank you. And thank you for your son's service, and may his memory be eternal, your husband, and may be blessed. Thank you so much. And thank you to our audience. Thank you for joining us tonight. And we'll see Sophia back here pretty soon, I think. Have a great evening. Bye-bye.